Good evening, everybody. I hope you are well. Thank you for joining us tonight for our first PAS Presents series in this age. And I'm really pleased tonight to welcome Michael Burritt, who is Director of Percussion at the Eastman School of Music and the President-elect of Percussive Art Society. So, Michael, thank you for being here tonight, and look forward to conversation, a little performance, a lot of Q&A, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Joshua. I appreciate that, and certainly it always feels good. I think right now the thing I found that I've enjoyed the most over the last few weeks is just getting to do things and connect with people. Even though it's this way, it still feels good, and it gives us something to focus on that's positive. So I appreciate you putting this together. Okay. I also want to thank you for having me on first or early in the game here, because if we wait too long, my hair is going to start to look a little funky, and I'll start to look like a member of the Grateful Dead or something, and then I would feel probably less enthusiastic about doing this. You know what I'm saying? So thanks for thinking of that. I know that crossed your mind. I appreciate it.
Always thinking of that.
Well, I'm going to start by playing something short for you, and I was thinking about this the other day, what to start with in terms of just give you a little taste of something at the beginning and before we get into doing some talking and questions. And I'm sure many of you know already that on Monday evening, the great John Pratt passed away. And that was a sad day for all of us when we woke up Tuesday morning and found that out. And I remember being a kid playing Pratt solos, oh gosh, forever ago. And the Pratt solos are something that my students are doing all the time. And really important figure who will be, he'll be a seminal figure forever in our field. And these solos are going to be played forever and ever. So I thought, why not do a little homage to John S. Pratt tonight and start with my favorite Pratt solo, although there's so many great ones. My students know this probably if they're listening. My favorite one is Ginger Snap. I love it. So I thought I'd play on my little pad here. I think the drum gets a little crazy loud. I found from my Zoom lessons that the snare drum is not always polite to us online. So this is my real feel, and I'm going to give you a little Ginger Snap to start the evening off here. All right. Bill John Pratt. Thanks for all those great solos and all that great material that will live forever that we get to use and enjoy. That's so important to us. And for me, it's interesting. I know well, my students know me fairly well. I know what my background, but so much of in my traveling and when I do concerts and guest appearances, I do a lot of marimba playing, although I have had my share of great mudra moments, which are the great Bob Becker piece mudra. I played a lot, but my roots go back to being a snare drummer. I started, my dad was a band director, and my mom was a clarinetist actually. And we both played in the Syracuse Symphony. I grew up in upstate New York, not too far from here. But I used to love watching my dad's marching band practice, and I used to learn when I was a little kid. I used to memorize all the snare drum parts to the marching band shows, and I started playing snare drum when I was probably second grade. And so the foundation of who I am as a musician, and really my motivation for being a percussionist, started with the snare drum. There's a great line in the Stuart Saunders Smith books, the Smith publication books, the Noble Snare books, and Stuart Saunders Smith at the beginning. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm good. Says he fell in love when he first heard a snare drum roll. He started to cry, which I thought was kind of cool, So I kept thinking that I've heard some snare drum rolls that have made me cry, but no. But anyway, so the snare drum was my first love, and actually, in terms of my teaching, my pedagogy, the snare drum is kind of the foundation of how I teach my students. For me, I can teach style, the musicianship, a lot through snare drumming. So for me, it's
I think that leads us to one of our first questions that we received.
okay.
And just to let everyone know who's watching, we received questions beforehand, but also we encourage you to put questions in the comment section. And I want to thank PIS colleague Amber Fox, who's on the background, who's going to be monitoring those. But the first actually talks about you as a teacher and for potential students and what you look for in an undergraduate student, a master's student, a doctoral student to come to Eastman.
Yeah. Wow. I get full service here at home. I get a little my drink here. So, well, that's a interesting question. And the question I get a lot from people, and it's really, and it's not one thing, but I can say this. Of course, there's different things at different levels for all students, and the level of expertise and your playing sophistication changes depending on if you're an undergrad and master's or a doctoral student. But the one things that I say what I have in common are first of all, curious people, for sure. People I know that I seem like they want to learn, that know they have to learn more and are eager to learn more. People that I think will be fun to work with, that will be good citizens of my studio, because for me, one of the most important things at Eastman or anywhere I've taught is to create a really positive environment for the students to learn in, sort of a nurturing scene that they all appreciate each other, know that there's differences between them. Some people have strengths and weaknesses, but they're willing to learn from each other. So the kind of person that I think will do that. So aside from the musicianship things, those are very important to me. Sort of, the integrity of the person or the personality of the individual. And then for me, it's sort of basic stuff that hit me first. I think that hit most people that listen to a lot of auditions. It's the first thing is your sound. Is it a mature sound? Is it a person that's thinking about the sounds they're making? It could be appropriate mallet choice. It could be as simple as are you overplaying on the instruments. Sound and time. How's your time? And it's really never about how hard the music is that you're playing. Right now, when I say that, it's easy. That doesn't mean that there isn't an expectation level for. I used the word earlier, sophistication, a level of sophisticated music at each sort of passageway or entryway in terms of those degree levels. But, I hear a lot of young percussionists come in playing music. Sometimes it's too hard for them. They're trying to play something that's probably they're not ready to play. And that's never as impressive as playing something that's in your wheelhouse that you're going to play well. You can show yourself off well. You can play with good musicianship, good confidence, play with authority, those kind of things. So it's a hard question to answer quickly. And it's obviously everyone's a little different, because everyone in my studio is unique and they all have, like I said, different strengths and weaknesses, slightly different interests. And I really enjoy that too. So I'm not looking for a student either that has one particular focus in their percussion, within the percussion idiom. I'm looking for people that have different interests. But I'm looking for great musicians. That's the success of it, because you can come in with one level of interest. You can come in thinking, I want to be one thing. I want to be an orchestral percussion. You can change your mind and fall in love with chamber music. You can come in thinking, I want to be a soloist. You fall in love with playing in the orchestra. You might end up becoming a composer, or, who knows what, going into pop music. There's a lot of things that my students have ended up doing, even outside the percussion world, that are really kind of fun and exciting to watch. So one of my former students from Northwestern, Ian Weinberger, who's was a great, probably still is a great player, great drum set player, is now the music director for Hamilton. So you never know what they're going to do. But I think the fundamental thing is, and the common thread is good, strong, mature musical ideals.
You spoke about composition. I love your story about how you started to get into composing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got into composing and why you really started composing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons for that. Okay. One of them is that some of my early influences as teachers were also writers. So in high school, I had a teacher that was doing a lot of arranging and composing. His name was Nick Burritt. He still teaches in the Syracuse area. And I was fascinated that he was not only playing music and really a wonderful musician. He went to New England Conservatory. And I admired him as a great deal as musicianship. But I also thought it was, wow, how cool that he's also writing music, And then my first couple of years of college, I went to Ithaca. And actually I was really fortunate because those first 2 years of my studies were Gordon Stout's first 2 years at Ithaca. And it was super fun to be there with him and get inspired by him again as a performer, but also, he, as everyone knows, great composer and a really important composer for us. And I thought, wow, what a cool paradigm. So that fascinated me. And then, I think it really hit me. I never really thought I could be writing music that would really matter or that I would want to play in public. And when I graduated from school, I got a job at Kent State University. I was a young guy and I was just out of school and didn't think I was going to stay there and do that. That's a whole nother story. I thought, well, I'll do this for a few years and I'll become a timpanist or something, So, but I was playing a lot of the rep that we had at that time. So when I was in school in the early 80s, 1980s, that is, the pieces that we played, Gordon's Mexican dances were sort of the new hot thing to play. There was, of course, the Japanese pieces that were super important from, the early 70s that came through, the Miki time from marimba, the Sioshi Mirage, Miyoshi Torch 3, all those pieces were also super cool. Tonica, 2 movements. So I played all those pieces, learned a lot of that stuff. That was still kind of hot. And remember that was coming out of Japan in 70s. So it didn't get to us till later 70s, really. We weren't really doing it. Michael Rosen was one of the people that sort of instigated us, getting to know what Keiko was doing, and John Beck got into it and was giving it to the students. So I did all that stuff, and I remember being a grad student, played variations on Lost Love. That was also new then, and it was like, wow. When I got out of school, it's like I played most of the rep that there was. It was before like pieces like Merlin and Velocities, the Druckmann, all those pieces weren't written. And I played a bunch of concertos. So it was like, gosh, I want to play something. I played a bunch of Bach, and I thought, well, I guess maybe I should fool around writing some music for the fun of it. And that sort of drove it for me, I mean, one of the funny, I remember when I was in school, one of the things I played everyone thought was the coolest thing in the world. Paul Schmadbeck lived about a block from the Eastman dorm in 1983. He was teaching that time at Nazareth College, which is a really nice school here in Rochester that has also has a nice music program. And my colleague, Kristen Shiner McGuire, teaches there now. But back then, Paul was there teaching, and I used to go over to his house, his apartment, because I knew Paul from my Ithaca days. He was good friends with Gordon, and I worked with Gordon. And I used to go there to watch cable TV and stuff, and kind of, snacks on this food. And he would just say, hey, Mike, I'm working on this new piece. And he starts playing a rhythm song for me. Brand new. It was like, wow, what's this? That's the coolest thing in the world. He said, hey, let's do it. I want to do it. I want to premiere it for like more than one player. So we premiered it at Eastman. He and I and Julie Spencer premiered like the 3 marimba version of that piece in the winter of '83. And everyone was like blown away. Like, oh my gosh. I remember my friends coming up to me going like, how did you remember that? And I was like, well, what can I say? So we thought we were pretty cool playing rhythm song back then. So, and I would be remiss not to mention the pieces also that Lee had commissioned, like Lost Love and some of the Helbo preludes and that stuff, and some of the transcriptions he had done were also being played. So anyways, it was a different time. So I got into writing and I started doing it and became something fun. And I never imagined that I would be writing pieces and people in different parts of the planet would be interested in playing the music, which is an incredibly deeply rewarding thing to have happen. And it makes it, I remember my friend Alejandro Vignal always says, I want to write something that's useful. And it feels good to write something that's useful. So I guess I would encourage any of you that are interested in writing, don't be afraid to write. I encourage my students to write. especially those who have any interest at all, because you never know where it's going to take you. You never know. Someone may thank you someday for writing that piece.
Let's see some of, I'd love to see in the chat some of your favorite Michael Burritt pieces, or maybe you're working on a piece right now and you have a question about, throw some of those in the comments. Let's see what everyone's doing. Offerings.
Oh yeah. Nice. You may hear the offering later.
Mag 7.
Mag 7, yeah. It's a fun piece. I can't play that. Only my grad students can play that. I didn't write that so I could play that. I wrote that so they could play it. I don't have to deal with that, So.
Last one here. White Pines. Anything special about any of those pieces you want to talk about?
You want to talk about them?
Yeah. I was working on, we got a lot. We got White Pines, Sweet Dreams and Time Machines, Doomsday.
Okay, well, I can talk about White Pines a little bit if you want me to. White Pines was something, it was a commission. The whole piece, it's part of a bigger piece called the Home Trilogy, which is the 3-movement piece. And that was a commission from Nexus. They had contacted me and asked me somewhere around 2009 to write a piece for them. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, can you write something to play with us? And I thought, okay. And that was kind of it. I'm thinking, these are my heroes. I grew up with Nexus being, and still are, So I wrote that piece during a sabbatical I had. Finally got around to writing it in 2014. And each movement of that piece sort of talks about a season in my house. So the first movement, Painted Hills, is basically the Painted Hills are the leaves on the grass, and sort of it's a nice mellow, kind of a mellow, easygoing. And so on. So it's this kind of mellow piece, opening movement that's sort of supposed to be a little John Cagean, like in a landscape. Maybe there's probably some landscape in there that you can hear. You're always borrowing from people and things you've been hearing and that are in your head. So that movement starts off. That movement starts the piece in sort of a more meditative, relaxed way. And then the White Pines movement. I've always been a big fan of Pat Metheny for many years, and I kind of wish I was a guitar player leading a band, kind of strumming away. And I love some of this, you see the energy of that and the sound. So the idea for White Pines was to have a piece that's sort of all that would sound like guitar strumming. So on. So that was sort of the inspiration for writing it. And then I was sharing this with one of my students this week. We were talking about writing. And for me, one thing I've learned in writing music is that you don't have to have a lot of ideas. You just need to have one idea, then develop the idea and try and take that as far as you can. So my idea was this initially in this was this guitar strumming thing, or an E, playing sort of in this E flat minor key area. And then I wanted to use E flat as a pedal. So the initial part of the piece, I use E flat as a pedal, and I move the harmony either away from it, this way, down the instrument, up it, and then away from it in both directions. And you can sort of hear that. So if you start at the beginning, you get. So that's going down, not go up. Now both directions. And so on. So my idea started with that strumming thing, E flat, use the pedal, and then let's take that pedal and move the harmony either down, up, and both directions away from it. Initially to develop the piece that way. And then I took, those of you who have played the piece know this, and those of you maybe who haven't, maybe are unaware, don't think about this. Sometimes, so as you compose, I guess I should stop to say too that, I don't lay in bed at night and come up with that idea. I'm going to take the harmony and do this. As I'm playing at the instrument or playing at my electronic keyboard and messing around, some of my intuitive musical skills or from playing other pieces take me in those directions. And all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to move this way. Okay, so I like that. Now let's move the other direction. Now let's move both directions, because those are kind of theory skills that you've seen other composers do. Let me do that. So then I thought, let me think about the meter. So it's in 4/4 at the beginning, and it stays in 4/4, all that section right there. And then I move away from 4/4, and I take it from 4/4 to 3/4, and I trim a beat away. So you're in 4/4. Then it goes to 3/4, and it stays in 3 for a while, which takes your meter, obviously just shaves off the beat, but it creates this really kind of, it's like an advertising they call subliminal advertising, where they're, you see it in movies too. Like all of a sudden, you notice they're all using Macintoshes on a movie or on a TV show. It's sort of subliminal advertising or something. It's like subliminal, just the way of sort of taking everyone's energy and moving it forward without actually moving the tempo. Take a beat away, and all of a sudden the energy goes forward more. Okay, you go forward further in the piece, and I slice another beat away, and you get into 5/8. So now take a quarter note away, then take an eighth note away. On like that, and then eventually we get back to 4/4. Then we move in the mixed meter. It's from there. So the 4/4, you come back to 4/4 to get to the middle section of the piece and ground it. So you have the harmonic motion that takes us to sort of the big climax in the first part of the movement, and then we take the meter, and it's kind of developed. Both, the harmony mostly pedals around after that. The energy comes from the meter and the energy of the rhythm. So the meter shaves away, creating an energy into the middle section of the piece. And so you can use all those kinds of ideas. And that's what's fun about composing, because I think of composing kind of like, I have if you could see this other side of my room right now, there's a little 4-piece drum kit in here. I'd rather play in a 4-piece kit than anything. If I have too many drums, man, it's like I don't know what to do. I'm always impressed with people that have a lot of drums. I like a lot of cymbals, actually, but not a lot of drums. But anyways, so because you can do a lot of cool things with less, I think, and I think the same thing's true with motives and composing. So that's kind of a little nugget on how the first part of Pines works, and then there's a whole middle section that comes in after that. That's another long, boring discussion, but that gives you some info on that.
All right, I think we also got it. Why don't we pull up a question here? I think the question I saw a second ago was, there we go. Can you read that?
Oh, what are MJB's top pieces he's written and that he's especially fond of? Oh, wow. It's a hard question to ask someone who writes music. It makes you sound like you're, I think everyone always feels like the best piece they've written is the one they just wrote. It's kind of that way a little bit, I'm still really fond of October Night, which is my first piece I ever wrote from Marimba back in '86. And it's always fun for me to get emails. Like just recently, I got some emails from people saying, apparently the publishing company that publishes that went out of business, and we're going to have to find someone else to do that. But people are still buying the piece. That's kind of satisfying. But that has a place in my heart because it was your first love, my first piece, and the fact that people still play it and that it still has some use. Over the years, Caritas always blows me away that people played a lot, and because I wrote it for my daughters when they were young. I think the pieces I feel best about musically, sometimes it's even just different movements of pieces. Like the second movement of a piece called Waking Dreams, that was for percussion quintet and marimba, that I wrote for a group called Tempest Fusion, really great percussion group out of Pittsburgh from the early 2000s. Brett Dietz was in that group, who teaches at LSU, and Dennis Hoffman, and a lot of great guys that are playing in service bands. Anyway, so I wrote a piece for them. The second movement's all crotales and marimba with wooden flute. Mark Bozeman just put a really beautiful video of that up. That I've always been proud of that piece. I like. I think when I think back about pieces that were fun to play, like I played Shadow Chasers forever. I don't know that it's a great piece, but it's fun to play and it kind of works. And that had its day and it's fun. And I enjoy playing that a lot. I certainly enjoy playing this a lot. I get to play it a lot now. I'm proud of the whole piece. I like this piece. I feel good about this and enjoy playing it. I enjoy playing Sweet Dreams and Time Machines because I wrote it for a colleague of mine who passed away, and it has it's special to me. And when I talk about it, I always get kind of choked up. But and I've had some really fun performances of that with Ivan, and that's special for me. And so I mean, I could pick a variety of things that down the road that I've done that have been fun.
Cool. What about here's an interesting question: how much does improvisation play into your compositional process?
Yeah, I mean, like that right there was sort of like I would start that by improvising, right? And I would, I had the idea. I had an idea of what I wanted to do aesthetically. I want to write something that sounds like guitar, so I started fooling around in E flat minor because it feels good. I like the way that key feels on the keyboard, and so a lot of that came from like improvising and fooling around. So like if you look at, for example, one of my more recent pieces. The Fragile Corridor, which is a piece for Ribbon Electronics. I wanted to write something for that medium, but I wanted to start with some 2 mallet stuff. And I just started messing around. So that's the beginning of that. And that started off as kind of an improv, or just messing around with those rhythms. And I got to. And I realized as I got into this, the rhythm that kept, the syncopation that kept getting into my ear was this sort of group of 5 within the motive of the piece that I ended up using 5 as a big sort of component in the piece. Because it starts off, you kind of hear it, I sort of inflected here in my syncopation. Almost sounds like 5/16 bars. It's all actually in 4, but it's syncopations that kind of are grouped in 5s. And eventually it gets into 5/16. Gets into a whole riff that goes into 5. In the cadence of that section, I finally end up in 5/16. And that happened through improvisation. Then I liked what I was doing. And then I used that idea in developing the idea. 5s. Then it goes into a section where I play on vibraphone and marimba, and my left hand ostinato is a big 5. It's like a big 5/4, bump 2 3 4 5 1 and 1. And there's 2 layers of that. There's actually 3 layers of that. 2 different layers of that same rhythm that go on over different beats in the electronic part, and I play a different layer here. And so that's sort of insinuating 5 again in a subliminal way, and that all came out of improvising and me sort of finding 5 as part of what I liked in there. And then the middle section, when I go to vibes, and it has all the sort of harpsichord sounds, sort of string sounds underneath the vibraphone stuff, is all in 5. They're all playing digga 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 digga, kind of really pretty. It's almost like you can't really hear the 5 because the rhythms sound bigger, but they're all groups of 5. And so now 5 is sort of driving that whole section, really. But I'm over the top playing sort of melismatic vibraphone passages. So that started off as an improvisation. Then I sort of developed it. A lot of it I wrote then sitting down at the keyboard, in my finale program. I'm going to come back over and try and learn it and stuff like that. So the ideas, the initial ideas, a lot of times come from me from improvising, because I feel like I create a better intuitive idea that way, that then I can then take my my developmental ideas and sit down and stretch them from there. So, but it's always fun to improvise and be able to mess around that way. You learn a lot, and you end up getting a lot of interesting stuff comes out, and you learn a lot about your playing that way, I think, too. So for sure. So
here's a great question, and it's so great that we have college students, high school students on, professionals. And William, I'm currently a freshman in high school and has marching band and concert marimba experience. And I think the question is switching back between the marching world, the concertizing world. Any tips for young students out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how to switch back effectively, or how do you do it, or should you do it? I mean, well, first of all, I will say that, and you can probably hear it in my snare drum playing, that I'm a person that has a lot of, in my history when I was a kid. My high school marching band was sort of a drum corps style band from that period, and I used to love that for sure. And I grew up with that in my blood. Still love going to DCI shows, and I think it's really fun. And I think there's so much great stuff that's done in that idiom. It's very interesting, very sophisticated, there's a lot of great music going on there. I love Vanguard. It's my favorite corps of what they're doing. It's always fun for me to watch that. So I have a great respect for it. And I think it's great. I have some students of mine have done it. I think, there's nothing wrong. If that's something that's a passion, you should definitely do it. I think understanding the differences between when you come inside and play something that's acoustic as opposed to an outdoor performance medium. I mean, acoustic's the wrong word, but there's a different context to it, and your sound world changes, and in some ways your technique has to change, right? And you're not as visually oriented, although certainly there's visual things that we do and proper technique that comes from a visual orientation, but it's not we don't start with some of those things. And I think the other side of it is when you're playing in a marching idiom, the great thing about it is you'll learn a great sense of precision, okay? And I think it's great for our ears. I think my snare drumming taught my ears to expect really clean sounds, so that when I played anything else I ever played, whether it be marimba or snare drum or anything, I always wanted clean sounds because my ears wanted my hands to do that. And that's really good. What I had to learn to do was be less literal in my musicianship. Because when I learned to play in that idiom, there wasn't a lot of wiggle room all the time. Here it was, and we had to put it where it was supposed to be all the time, okay? And that's a really important thing to learn, whether you play an orchestra, a percussion ensemble, a mixed chamber ensemble, whatever. But there's also a lot of give and take in music, and to make phrases work certain ways, and not just in terms of bending tempos, but even making sort of lines and learning to do that on snare drum as well as marimba and whatever instrument we're playing in the percussion family. So I think those things you have to remember to transfer when you come inside and change your orientation that way and learn to do that. I've had students that have had to work at that, but there's other things they don't have to work at. I have other students that are great at that, but don't have that clean expectation in their ear and have to learn some of those other skills. So
great. Well, here's someone we know. Question.
Theodore, how are you? Wow, I'm honored.
So how do you arrange your time between teaching, playing, composing, and family?
Yeah. How do you do it? I could ask him. Well, that's a really incredible question. I remember someone asked me that question. How do you do it successfully? And my kids are grown up now and are not in the house anymore. But we had 3 kids, and man, my Northwestern days when I lived in Chicago was intense. We had 3 kids. We moved there when the kids were 9 months, 3 years old, and 7 years old or something. So it was a crazy time. And I think the most important thing I would say to a father or a mother that's dealing with this, and I know there's complications, it's difficult, it's tricky. I think one thing is really important is to always, it's like anything else. It's like the same thing with your playing. I think it's like you can never rest on your laurels, right? So if you're always conscious of trying to be balanced, always conscious of trying to I always felt like I was a person with all these plates in a room spinning on sticks, and I was running from one to the other, trying to make sure that the plates didn't fall off the sticks, And I think that's what it is. You're just trying to make sure you're especially as a parent and a husband, making sure that you're always putting them first and trying to be aware of that. And I think if you want to be good at that, you will be, because you care about it, just like it is when you're playing in anything else. So I remember there was a time, just to answer that question in a more literal way. I mean, I'm sure Theodore's been through this too. I mean, there's times where I used to get up super early in the morning. Remember, I had a couple commissions, and I would get up and go. I had a studio in my basement of my house, and I would get up. Honestly, there was a period of time I was getting up at like 4 a.m, to write music because I had to get some stuff done. But I found it to be a great time because it was so quiet in the house. My kids were not here, and I could get a couple hours of writing in early in the morning. You get some stuff done. I put my coffee. He had this little coffee warmer. Put it on there, and I just get downstairs and my work, and it was, it was productive then. But you learn to be a good time manager, that's for sure. And I always tell my students they got to manage their practice time because they won't have as much of it when they get older. So when you get to be, you have a family and you're balancing all that, you have to learn that, if I have a half hour to practice, you can get stuff done. I used to think I have to have at least an hour or I just can't use that time. I got 20 minutes. Ooh, I can run through this and do that. So you start to be more efficient and actually, I think, celebrate the time you have when you have it for sure. So I'll say one more thing about it from a human level,
Sure.
If I can. And some of the students, I don't know if everyone will appreciate it. I'm sure Theodore will, and I know you will, Josh, that I think being a father and a parent has definitely made me a better teacher and a better musician. And just from living life, and it changes you in a good way. So I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I'm going to get ahead of Amber here and ask you, this is a great question. Favorite percussion history, performers, composers, pieces everyone should check out, but may not have heard of.
Oh, something obscure they want me to tell them or something? Or?
Maybe we haven't heard of it. Yeah, who knows?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is something we were doing at school before we had to all go home. And it's not a composer that's necessarily totally obscure because it may be less known to the younger students. Michael Colgrass, who's written a lot of great percussion music, won the Pulitzer Prize, I think in like either 1985, 86 for a piece he wrote for the New York Phil called Deja Vu, which is a piece for 4 percussion and orchestra. It was written back when like Roland Koloff and I think Arnie Lang and Mo Goldenberg, those guys were all in the section. I don't know if I'm totally correct on that, so don't quote me on the exact section, but it's a cool piece called Deja Vu. Now, that's not the piece, although that's a cool piece to check out. There's also a band transcription, wind ensemble one of Deja Vu with 4 percussion solos. Super cool piece, great colors. My favorite Michael Colgrass piece that we were doing just before we had to, all sort of take shelter, is a piece called Fantasy Variations for percussion sextet and solo percussionists playing 8 chromatic drums. And it's kind of the precursor to the rototoms. And Michael Colgrass made these little small cardboard drums. There's 8 of them. You tune them chromatically. Super cool. Almost sounds like quads. Just, the writing is beautifully lyrical and all over these drums. But the orchestration of this sextet is absolutely fantastic piece. And all these really cool, interesting metric modulations in the movements. You have to listen to it and kind of give it some time. But I think it's a really, really gem of a piece that was written, gosh, I want to say maybe 1961, before I was born, maybe 68. I don't know. I'm sorry. My scholarly brain is not working for me, but it's certainly a piece from that era. There's a great recording of it on an album called Percussion Music. It's a Ray DeRoche group. It's a New Jersey percussion ensemble, famous group. And it's a great ensemble piece. In terms of solo pieces, hidden pieces, hidden gem. I think the Alfred Fischinger Suite for Marimba. I love some of the movements, especially the chorale movements in that. There's a great recording that Lee Stevens did of that you can get on iTunes. There's 4 movements, and the first and third movement are chorales, and they're absolutely beautiful. I think Vita Chenov was maybe the first one to play that, written, I believe, even in the 50s. Beautiful, beautiful piece. It was when I played it as a freshman or maybe a sophomore in college before there was a lot to play, and it was kind of a bigger piece then, but it's just a beautiful piece and worthy of checking out for sure.
Yeah, why don't we hit up Seth's question here? It says, is there anyone you draw inspiration from when you were writing and or performing?
Oh, well, I mentioned a few there. Certainly Gordon. Performing. There's a lot of great performers that I admire. I mean, I was a kid. It was I was kind of a drum set fiend, so I grew up being a person who really admired people like Steve Gadd and Peter Erskine, because I thought I was going to be a drum set player at the time. Still love playing drum set, but didn't end up going on the road with Chicago like I had hoped, So, those guys when I was younger, and certainly like I grew up with, Lee Stevens and Gordon were a good decade ahead of me, and they were I was big fans of theirs. Bob Becker, I still admire him. and all the Nexus guys, and so, and even the young students. I mean, this doesn't go just that way. It's not just people that are ahead of you. Now, like I draw inspiration from like what Pius is doing, and watching Eric perform, or the Third Coast guys perform, or what watching Theodore play. It's inspirational it's fun to see, what's happening in that generation and what they're doing to take percussion even further. So I would say on both sides of it, those are certainly inspirations to me. My dad was, I mentioned him as a teacher. He was not a great performer, but he was a great educator and a great motivator, and someone who taught me the value of those things, and the importance of community within your teaching and things like that. So he was an inspiration to me too. So.
I want to address a few things for those who came on late. First, we will be posting this on YouTube once it's done. So if there's people who don't have Facebook, they can go and watch it. You can rewatch it there, not just on Facebook, but we have a whole series up on YouTube, both of our PAS Present series, which will be Wednesdays, and then our fundamentals on Fridays, which you can see there as well. We have a few more quick questions, and then Mike is going to play at the end. And some of the questions we're skipping, maybe we already answered, and then we won't be able to get to everyone's questions, and we're very sorry. But we will write these down, and I bet I could get Mike to answer some of them for me, and we can definitely reply back to you. So Dave Gerhardt had a really cool question. Is there anything you're doing non-music right now, non-music related?
What do I like doing that's non-musical? Is that the question?
Yeah, like right now, since we're home.
Oh, what am I reading or watching for non-musical inspiration? Oh, wow, that's great. Well, what am I doing? I mean, I just finished watching the HBO series The Outsider, Stephen King. That was fun. So I went back. I'm going back right now. One of my favorite all-time shows is a show called Mad Men, which my wife and I love. So we went back. If you've never seen that show, it's a fantastic show. It's a great show about the 60s and advertising in New York City. But it's not just that the writing is great, the acting is great, and the direction, the art direction of the show, it's always just beautiful to me. It looks so great. I also just downloaded and been watching the Berlin Philharmonic app, which is really fantastic. It's free for a month. If you haven't seen that app, it's absolutely spectacular. They have a digital concert hall, and there's great concerts available. I was listening to Beethoven 9. It was Saturday or Sunday morning. Oh, and the sound is great. If you have an Apple TV, you can put it on your system, put your headphones on with your computer, your iPad or something. You can watch, and you watch the timpanist percussion section, the whole orchestra. Super fantastic. There's a great Mahler 2 performance on there. One that has Berlioz Symphonia and Concerto for Orchestra. Super cool stuff. So that's really great. And then, we had a phone call with my friend Alejandro Vignal last Thursday in my studio. We did like a session where he was answering questions and talking to us, and kind of like this kind of scene here, and Alejandro mentioned Grigori Ligeti and some of his music and some of his piano etudes. So I went and I'd heard them, but never really listened to them a lot. Just sort of was aware of them, and so I downloaded a recording of his pieces and been listening to that just to change my soundboard a little bit. It's just amazing music. So I recommend it. Check out Ligeti. Great composer. Did such amazing things. So, so sometimes it's just going in different directions, So, and I do a lot of running. I jog. Like to run. Keeps me fresh. I get to go outside and stuff and listen to podcasts or music, whatever it is. So, yeah.
We got a question from a high school senior. Okay. I know a lot of seniors out there.
Do you have any advice for a high school senior who's having trouble deciding where to go to school for music performance? Well, I mean, yeah, that's a really good question. And because I have, obviously right now we're in the middle of what I would call recruiting season, and I'm trying to get in some really great young students to come to Eastman too. So, but I really think it's important. I guess there are a couple of things I would say about this that are like sort of, I always tell my students when they're making comments in our studio class that they should think big to small. So make the big comments about the bigger things, impressions of the performance, to the smaller things like where your pinky is in your grip and things like that. So I think when you're looking at a school, think about the big, most important things. Like it's almost like buying a house. What are your things that you really have to have? And what are the things that you can do? And I think for sure in our field, if you're a percussionist studying performance, I still believe that the teacher-student thing is the most important thing, right up there, because that's this is one of our last bastions of apprenticeship, I think, and it's super cool. It's one of the things that I love about what I do, that I get to really I get to mentor some really great, exciting young people, and they become a big part of my life. And I think you want to find the person that you feel like you connect with and someone you really are inspired by musically, you want to learn from. Certainly you can learn, you can see that from what they do, but what their students are doing and how their students respond and what the energy is. Check out what the studio is like. Is the studio a place that seems like a dynamic, thriving thing? It's almost like a good studio is like a really alive organism. You know what I mean? And I think those are really important things. And what are the students? What is that teacher's students? What are they doing in the world, in the field? What have they done in the course of that teacher's profession, history? Now, some teachers like me were older, so we have a big swath of students doing things. I just saw my students up there at Troy came on or something. It's kind of cool to see that. I love that. Maybe it was Wei Pan too. I wasn't sure who was on there, but that's a cool thing to check that out. See what they're doing. Are they doing the kind of things you want to do? And then it's just, I think, the overall vibe of the school. Where would you be happy? Because some places have big campuses that make you happier. Some places are conservatories that are a smaller environment. But remember, whether you're on a big university or a small conservatory, usually your world is small. Okay. Yes, you can be in a big world. Say living in Manhattan. You don't know everyone that's in Manhattan. It's kind of cool to be in this big place, but really, most people that I know, they kind of have their friends and they hang out and they have the little village within the city. And the same thing's true in school, right? You have your little village within the big campus. So I think either of those places you can still have great community. It just depends on where you feel most comfortable. But I think the teacher or the teachers should drive it for you, for sure. Don't worry about the weather. If the weather was an issue, like I live in Rochester, I could never get anyone to come here. So the weather could be a distraction, right? So.
I mean, I went to Long Beach State, so weather was a distraction on the other end. So
I've never got to teach anywhere. All my jobs have been cold. It's like Kent, Ohio, which is near Cleveland, and then Chicago for 13 years, and now here. So, yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to leave it here because I know that you wanted to play a little something for us on the way out. But before I did that, I do want to let everyone know here. Thanks again for joining us for this PAS Presents. And Michael, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I think it's kind of a crazy time, but you're still teaching nonstop and all those students and balancing that family. So I would really want to appreciate you taking time for PAS to do this. We've got a lot of questions about what can I do for PAS right now from a lot of people, and first and foremost, I do want to say that we will continue to do this stuff for free, but of course, renewing your membership, joining if you haven't been in a long time or joining for the first time, that's how you can help PAS right now. Really being active. We have a lot of stuff to offer. PAS, we're going to get through this time. We're going to be here. We are planning nonstop for PASIC in November, Mike and the rest of the board, the staff. So we're going to get through this. We're going to have a really big party in November in Indianapolis. Great performances. See all of our industry friends again. So really, thank you so much. And if we didn't get to your question, we're going to try our best to do that. But thanks again. And Mike, why don't you play us out? The last thing I do want to say, I saw Neil Grover on there. He said, Joshua, on Passover. Yes, I'm going to my Seder Zoom right after this. So I wish everybody a happy Passover today and tomorrow, and happy Easter to everyone else later on this week, and hope everyone stays safe and healthy.
Absolutely. Joshua, thanks for having me. Thanks. So back in 2001, it's interesting how these times relate to me, because of course 2001 we had the horrible thing that happened on September 11, 2001. And that was I was old enough, certainly. I had kids, and some of the younger students don't remember that so well. And I'm certain people my age and others of you do. The world felt different after that happened. And I, during that year, sort of serendipitously, really close to my grandparents, and my grandfather passed away, and he passed away when I was overseas. So I wasn't able to get back here in time to be with him for his funeral. So when I came back, the first thing I did was write a piece of music. And I wrote a piece that some of you know, some of you asked about it, called The Offering, which is a simple piece. and I wrote it as a way to sort of purge my emotions. And I played it a lot since then. Actually, I haven't played it in a while. I had to kind of dust it off and pull it back out again because I didn't actually remember how it went, which is never a good feeling when you wrote your own piece. You can't remember it. But so I wrote this piece. It's sort of like a chorale without roles, and I wrote it for my grandparents, who were super really great people who lived 2 blocks down the street from me when I was a kid. And I used to go down there, and I used to deliver muffins from my mom on my bicycle to my grandmother, and I always eat one along the way. I always get caught though somehow. I don't know how that worked out. I didn't think my grandmother could add or something. She was expecting 8 muffins. She got 7, and I thought somehow she wouldn't notice. But great people who had a profound impact on me in my life. And so this is for them. And it's also a piece I think that was indicative of the time, because it felt like a time that I needed to write something like this because of the country, and they were mourning, and the way there was a kind of a reset. And I feel like the same thing is true now. And I had a few people ask me about this piece in the last couple of weeks. So I thought maybe I should play this at the end here. Nothing flashy, but something hopefully thoughtful and can resonate with you guys a little bit. And I just hope everyone stays safe and knows that we will get through this, and it's going to be harder for some of us. I don't think it's easy for any of us. And I think that the most important thing is that we appreciate each other. And when we get back to some semblance of normalcy, I was telling my students, it's going to feel like such a great thing. We're going to appreciate so many things that we were, probably most of us, and I know myself, took for granted. And that's going to be a really special feeling. That's the silver lining, that someday we'll get to all hang again and make some music together again. But now it's important that we pay attention to all this, and we stay safe, so we can get through this for ourselves and for others. So, and I'm available. My email is available. If I can help anyone with anything or answer any questions, I'm happy to try and do so at this time. So thanks for watching tonight, and I appreciate all of you, and keep playing music, okay? So here's the offering.